So Jo Allen is a very persuasive lady, and asked me if I'd do one of the Meet the Hiring Manager sessions, which I was happy to do. And I thought hiring, surviving and thriving might be a useful tagline, because that's the way it sometimes felt to me through my career in IT so far. So it's quite a personal, I guess, canter through a number of aspects of what I believe a hiring manager is looking for. But I've then also taken it in a little bit of a different direction as well, and going to talk a bit about networking as a key route to securing your next role, but also actually a key route in how you can do really well in interviews and actually wow that hiring manager. So without further ado, quick agenda. So got the t-shirt, got the battle scars, wiggly lines, which takes us into a networking exercise. Becky, I think you've done this networking exercise before, so you can go make a cup of tea if you want. But for everybody else, the networking exercise, you need to be fully equipped with something to write with and something to write on. So a pen or a pencil and a large bit of blank paper. That'll just help that go. And then, rather quirkily, continuing on a quirky theme, what matters, the Great Eight, and what matters, the Seven Deadly Sins. So I think some things to focus on doing and some things to focus on absolutely not doing. And then a bit of Q&A at the end. So that's the plan. And please use chat for anything that you want to pick up at the end. I'm not very good at monitoring chat whilst I'm presenting, so we'll probably sweep up on the chat and the Q&A at the end. So got the t-shirt. Who is this strange guy who's speaking to you? So I've been around the block a fair bit. I've had 5 employed roles, permie roles, 4 of which were in IT. I started out in retail, so I've gone through quite a significant career change. And then I made another change and I went contract. So I'm now working in the 6th organization as a contract PM for hire. So I've done a lot of job searching over the years. I've also done quite a lot of interviewing. So I think I know my way around the process. And for me, sometimes that's been a sprint. My most recent contract that I'm in at the moment, I decided to start looking in earnest at the start of January. And I was lucky enough to secure a verbal offer in working day 9. So that was the sprint. But I've also done a marathon, which took 14 months, which isn't a lot of fun. So I kind of know, both of those aspects. I've also in my career done quite a bit of had quite a bit of outplacement support, and what that means is typically when an organisation takes over another, mergers and acquisitions, if there's going to be a number of people exiting the business, then quite often they're provided with outplacement advice and guidance to help them make that transition. And I've also done some careers counselling. And just to really show how old I am, I've really seen the evolution of the recruitment process and the sort of our tech revolution. So when I started out in IT, when I was applying for roles at that time, which was in the late 90s, the way you did it is you bought the newspapers, particular days of the week for particular papers. They had an appointment section, and you'd get your scissors and you'd snip out the advert, and you'd get a highlighter pen and you'd mark up the keywords, and you'd tailor make your CV. You'd write a letter, type up a letter, put them in an envelope, post them off, and the whole thing took ages. So things are a lot different now, a lot slicker, and sometimes a lot quicker. And there's my LinkedIn profile. Any of you who want to connect with me, please do so. I'm happy to stay in touch and help one-to-one with anything that you might want to discuss further. So that's the T-shirt, and this is the battle scars. That's Johnny Cash up in the top scars. I thought that was a good tag in the top right-hand corner. But I do feel like a bit of an imposter, because when Joe asked me to do one of these Meet the Hiring Manager series talks, I thought, well, I haven't actually hired anyone for about 15 years. But when I thought about it a bit more, I thought, well, I have hired probably about 10 people in my career. I run teams, project teams and service teams and account teams earlier in my career. So I'm always adding people to teams that I manage and lead. And that's probably in the hundreds of people that I've sort of added to teams. I've interviewed and been interviewed for over 22 years in IT. I've met far too many hiring managers, and I guess I've sort of figured out what works. So the very persuasive Joe persuaded me to do one of these talks, and I thought, yeah, all of that sort of added together probably means I've got something useful to add. I think quite a key thing for me, and probably for all of you, whatever stages of your careers you're at, these days careers do not go in straight lines. Mine certainly hasn't, and I think that will be the experience for most, if not all of you. So I thought I'd sort of pull this together. It was partly for my own sort of just to embed a few things, but also to make a few points. So hit rate means, I got one role, but I had 21 interviews for my first role in IT, and I was sort of searching in 98, 99. And NW, that means how much networking did I use to get that role? And that's a high, medium, low flag. And as you can see, there aren't any lows in that column. So I started out in IT. I moved to telco, managing a big financial services client. That was a bit better. That was one success with 7 interviews. And the successful one that I had was almost entirely through networking. The role itself wasn't advertised. I then had a bit of a long slog. That was my marathon. 16 interviews to get my next role. That was partly because we were in the middle of the banking crash and not a lot of people were hiring. And I made it, staying in IT, but I made another adjustment and I moved into sort of applications and offshore delivery then. And I made another change into projects in public sector. Again, a lot of networking to land that one. And then encouragingly for me, I made a change, set up my own limited company, went contract. And since then, you'll see almost all of those roles that I've secured have been through a lot of networking. And the sort of hit rate has been far, far better. So I've secured those roles typically more quickly and with less, probably with more focus and with less mucking about. So wiggly lines in the top right, bottom right, wait a second, something's not right. So when I pulled this together, it reminded me that throughout that journey, I've also had about 5 job offers that I've turned down, because you sometimes just realize through the process of an interview process and meeting people in that company and negotiating an offer, this just isn't going to work for me. So you actually decline some offers, which takes a bit of bottle. A couple of times I've done that. It's because I've had 2 offers at the same time. Other times it's been, I just don't think this is right for me and I need to keep looking. And I've also about 10 times. I've just withdrawn myself from an interview process. I've maybe gone to the first interview. They've offered me a second interview, but I've gone, nah, it's just not going to be right for me. So wiggly lines, I think adjusting your technique to how you go about finding your next role, taking and making your chances, and use networking to help you get to where you want to be. So I keep going on about networking, and Joe actually asked me, excuse me, Joe actually asked me to do a bit more on networking in this talk than I might originally have been thinking of doing. So I just thought, right, I'll do the blank piece of paper exercise again. So hopefully you all got your pen, your pencil, and your blank piece of paper. And what I want you to do is put a dot, or if you're really adventurous, put a little stick person right in the middle of that blank piece of paper. Okay, so that's you, surrounded by that ocean of white space. And then around that dot or that stick person, draw a circle, one circle. And then outside that circle, a bigger circle, and draw 3 or 4 of those concentric circles. And by now you're wondering what on earth this is all about. So you should now have something a bit like that. And this is, to me, this is understanding your network, and this is understanding the process of really what networking is all about. So you're in the middle of that blue circle, and that represents everybody that you know that you're directly connected with, okay? And potentially some of those people can help you with advice, with information, with assistance in securing your next role or preparing for your next interview. But the great thing about networking is nothing works by osmosis, nothing works just by people being clairvoyant. You have to engage with people, and the best place to start, the logical, in fact, the only place to start, is with the people that you already know. So that's about understanding your network. And what I'd encourage everybody to do, not right now, but if you are looking for your next role or trying to figure out what to do next, literally in a Word document, in an Excel spreadsheet, make a list of everybody that you know who you think might just be able to provide you with some assistance, okay? And that's all the people who are sort of first level connections with you. And then, once you've done that, this is what you look to do next. You look to expand and utilize your network. So you start off with a meeting with somebody in that first ring, that first circle. That's your first level network. And you approach them in a very professional, business-like way. You let them know what you're thinking about doing next. You ask them for some advice, for some information, and you look to set up a meeting with them. Might be a call. We used to be able to meet in coffee shops and pubs. Hopefully we will be able to do that again. Could be a Zoom. It's whatever it is. You have a discussion with them. You don't put them on the spot. You ask for advice and information. And if you approach people in the right way, particularly people that you already have that direct connection with, almost everybody will be really happy to help if they can. But you can only uncover if that person can provide you with some assistance if you engage them in that conversation and tell them what it is you're after. And weird things then happen. It might be their best friend or their next door neighbor is somebody who is works in a company or an organization that might be ideal for you. And what then happens is you ask for a referral to that person, and that's the blue arrow to the number 2. So that's somebody that is known to your first level acquaintance. You have the conversation with them, and they make that introduction to you. So this carries on. You expand your network, you utilize your network, and you will be astonished by what you uncover and by the level of assistance and information and advice that you can receive. So at this stage, when I did a version of this talk earlier in the year, I think it was in January, and if you look very hard, or if you ask Morag, you can probably find a recording of that. I did a really scary thing. I did a bit of live networking, and I picked on somebody to be my co-conspirator. So I'm going to do it again. And Joe, it's going to be you. You'll need to take yourself off mute.
Yes, I'm ready. I'm ready. What's our conspiracy? The world is full of conspiracy at the minute. So
the world is full of conspiracies. This is much, much more simple. So Joe and I know each other. I'm going to contact Joe over the phone, and I'm going to ask her for some information. So that's what we're doing. This is totally unscripted. When I tried it with Morag, it came out with a successful outcome. Who knows what will happen now? But this is just a live demonstration of what networking could be all about. So, Joe, I've got a bit of a problem at the moment in my house. I've got some problems with leaking pipes, and I really need to get some work done. Now, I've got a thought that you house in your flat, or you may know of a really reputable plumber who you might be able to refer me to. So sorry to put you on the spot, but is there anybody you can think of who I could go to, please?
Yes, I know a plumber that I could recommend to you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Joe. I'm really glad I contacted you. If it's not too much trouble, if you could just send me through their contact details, and even better, if you could maybe have a chat with them and just let them know that I'll be contacting them in the near future.
Sure, no problem.
That's great. Thanks very much, Joe. Right, so that's the end of that little bit of craziness, live networking about how you find a plumber. But actually, that demonstrates all the core principles of what networking is about. So you start with somebody you know. I know Joe. Joe's in my blue circle. I have a hunch that Joe might have some information or know somebody that might be useful to me. But then just think through how this works beneficially for all 3 people. So I have a chat with Joe. It has a positive outcome, and I have a great deal of confidence that Joe is only going to refer a plumber to me who's a reputable plumber. If it's a plumber who botched up Joe's life or a friend's life, she's not going to make that referral. For Joe, it was hopefully a positive experience that you feel, yeah, I was able to help Andrew, and I was also maybe able to help the plumber to get another good piece of work. And then even for the plumber, it's beneficial, because if he's worked with Joe and had a positive experience, he'll be pretty confident that anybody that Joe refers on is not going to be a raving lunatic, but is going to be somebody who's going to be a good client. So it's kind of a win all round. Now, the only bad thing that could have happened is Joe could have said, no, I'm sorry, I don't. Or the only plumber I know is absolutely hopeless. But even then, what's the downside? You know, we've contacted each other and we've had a good chat. So, you know, from this concentric circles exercise and that bit of live unscripted networking, you can hopefully get the idea here that there is a wealth of information within your immediate network and then expanding out that can provide you with an enormous amount of assistance. So I've personally had meetings with people in that, at that fourth level. Somebody has referred me to somebody else who's referred me to somebody else. And some of those meetings have been incredibly productive. And some of those people I'm still in touch with. So the other thing is that means your level 1 network itself expands. You know more and more people. So you're then able to help more people in turn. So hints and tips on the networking. Doesn't come naturally to everyone. So be brave. Start safe and practice. Start with your best mate. Start with somebody where there is absolutely no chance of any negative outcome or any feeling embarrassed. And you start with your level 1 network. You start with the people that you already know: friends, neighbours, relatives, work colleagues, people in the STA, previous work colleagues. You remain professional and business-like throughout. So you're not putting anybody under any pressure. You're asking for advice and information for each and every meeting. People are happy to be asked for advice. I think in networking, people respond better if you go in with quite a clear ask or quite a clear thing that you want to chat through. It doesn't work as well if it's all a bit vague. I suggest you enjoy it if you can. I do, but then I'm quite a sociable, sometimes extrovert individual. But you'll enjoy it more the more you do it, and there's a lot of assistance you'll get, not just in working out what you want to do next and getting there, but in life skills generally. So, as in all things vaguely IT orientated or vaguely work orientated, refine your approach and your technique as you go. Number 7, I think, is crucial, and the same goes for interviews as well. Always write back and follow up with people. You'd be amazed how few people do that and how much difference as a hiring manager or as somebody who has been a mentor and does get approached in a networking sense. Makes a huge difference if people do write back. It really, really sets you apart. And you can make that, a follow-up in a networking meeting or in an interview with a friendly thank you, but also an ask. So I enjoyed our conversation. I enjoyed our interview. It reaffirmed my interest in the role or in X, Y, and Z. I remember we talked about this particular thing. Could you maybe tell me a bit more about that, or give them a reminder on some actions that they offered to take? Be organized and keep records. I've got network lists from way back. LinkedIn helps you keep in touch with people, definitely, but I don't think it's a replacement. I think keep tabs on your network, on the people that have helped you previously, proactively keep in touch with people, and that's all about keeping records. And then help others. It's a networking merry-go-round. You can help somebody, somebody can help you. And that may not be a one-to-one relationship. Some of the people who have helped me most in securing some of those roles were perhaps quite unexpected. But if you approach people in the right way with the right ask, you'll be amazed where that comes from. But then we've got Mark Beaumont up at the top right-hand corner, and you may be wondering what that's all about. So that's one of my favorite books. He's a very well-known athlete now, but when he wrote that book, He was completely unknown. When he broke the world cycling record for the first time, again, he was completely unknown. He just graduated from Glasgow Uni, wasn't quite sure what to do next, and came up with this crazy notion of breaking the world record cycling cycle single-handed and unsupported. But he needed quite a lot of sponsorship to cover his running costs. He also wanted to raise money for charity, and he also wanted, if possible, to film a documentary. So he's got just 2 or 3 pages at the start of that book, which are some of the best things about networking I've ever read. So he describes how he spent about 6 months writing to companies, organizations, people he thought he could help, and he got precisely nowhere, apart from very, very frustrated. So he asked his cousin, so first level network, he asked his cousin, what am I doing wrong? I'm never going to get to live my dream here. I'm never going to get to cycle around the world. Can you give me any advice? And she said, use your network and ask for advice. He says, well, I don't really have a network. And she says, well, just start with the people that you know. Long story short, 3.5 weeks later, he had all his sponsorship in place, his lead sponsors. He had a contract with the BBC, and he was ready to go. Quite extraordinary turnaround from what he had been doing, which was just kind of like blind contacting people, to actually just trying to navigate a network and get to the people who could help. And he achieved that within 3.5 weeks. So we've digressed a bit from meet the hiring manager to a rummage around networking. And I was going to take it back now to, if that slide wants to advance. This always happens, doesn't it? I know why that is, because I'm clicking on the wrong one. So
the down arrow is your friend in that situation.
Indeed. So what do I think is the great 8 in terms of being hired, in terms of meet the hiring manager, in terms of making that impression, and in terms of getting hired? First one you often hear, it's phrased different ways, but the hiring manager is looking for 2 things, either some combination of aptitude and attitude, or experience/achievement and culture fit. So it's kind of like what you know and what you've done, but also how well you will fit within their organization and their culture. So to wow on both of those, it's very much, starts from the CV, in my opinion. It's tuning the CV, picking up from the job description or from your understanding of that role, what are the most relevant things that I've done, bringing them to the fore in your CV and your covering letter. That hopefully will help you get through the first barrier, which is to get in front of the hiring manager and have that first interview. So what I do, and I've done it for years and years and years, I keep lists of achievements or greatest hits from all the roles that I've done. And the reason I do that is it's amazing how quickly you forget stuff. You forget how many people were in the team, how long it took to deliver something, what exactly you did. So write it down, in detail. And then when you come to spotting that job ad, or you've got a speculative meeting, you can quickly farm through the list of all those achievements, condense them down to the most relevant bullets, and get them onto your CV. The other thing that it does is, if you're asked in an interview for, can you give me an example of X, or a time when you did Y, rather than doing the sort of goldfish impression or playing for time, the fact that you've documented and you've got it up here, you can much more quickly and snappily give really good examples. And that's what hiring managers are often looking preparation, I think, is absolute gold dust. You can't necessarily be the best candidate. You don't know who else they're interviewing, but you can move mountains to be the best prepared candidate, to know more about what they're looking for in that role, more about their organization, their results, what strategically that organization is doing next, how it feels to work in there. You can do a huge amount of preparation, and you should. If you don't, you're potentially letting yourself down, and you're not going to get through to the next stage. You're not going to get to offer. Anything else on preparation? Yeah, back to networking. That's a huge tool in your preparation. You've got an interview with Barclays Bank in 2 weeks' time. Go find some people who work in Barclays Bank in a similar area. Have a chat with them. Do your research on the company. Do your research on what their change initiatives are, what's going on in their business. Be really, really well prepared. The classic there is also, I sometimes say to people, just go Google top 10 most common interview questions ever, and be prepared to answer them. Have answers ready, because I'll almost guarantee that you'll get asked one or two of those in any interview. And the classic, it's often used as an icebreaker, is, so how much do you know about our company? How much do you know about our organization? Or tell me a bit about yourself, or why do you want to work here? And to be honest, if you fluff that, you've fluffed the whole thing. Yeah. So look at that top 10 and be ready for it. Body language, it's key. It's a set of things. When you're in a face-to-face interview, it's exactly the same set of things through a telephone medium or a video conference medium. It's showing that interest, that energy, that engagement. First to last impression. First impression starts first time you make any contact about that role. It starts way before the interview. There's a bit of an old school statement, but I hold that it's still true. Your first impression is also as soon as you walk through the door of the organization. If it's a face-to-face interview, you go up to a reception desk. Be amazed how many times that receptionist or the PA or whoever is asked for an opinion. There may be 5 candidates come through that day. So what did you think? How were they? It's exactly the same in a Zoom or a Teams interview. It's the moment you make first contact with the organization, and then the first time you make contact with the hiring manager, or the people you'll have to meet before you get to the hiring manager. Bit of a catch-all next: energy, evidence, environment, ecosystem. You want to be doing all of those. Come in with some energy, come in with lots of evidence of what you've done, why it's relevant, evidence of your research into their organization, so you can demonstrate that you know about their environment, that the organization, the company, you know about how they're set up, what their annual results are, what they're doing, why they might be actually wanting to hire for this role, how that fits in with what else is happening in their business, but also their ecosystem. So if you're going for a role in public sector or in health, understand about the public sector health ecosystem, not just what that organization does, but what the sort of the value drivers are, what's going on in that business domain. Questions and answers. So questions is 2. It's going in with well-prepared questions as well as how well you will be evaluated as answering their questions. I think going in with half a dozen questions that are the key things that you want to know. But then tune that list as you go through the interview, because they'll have ticked some of them off anyway. You'll have had a discussion about various points, and you no longer need to answer. You no longer need to ask a couple of the questions. You can tune a question quite acutely within the course of an interview to actually demonstrate your knowledge. Do a bit of a playback through the question, ask for some clarification. I was really interested by what you were saying earlier about XYZ. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how that relates to this role? So, you're demonstrating insight, you're demonstrating interest, and you're joining the dots. And answers is also two-way. You should be evaluating how much you want this role based upon how well your questions are answered, in the full knowledge that you're being evaluated in terms of how well you answer their questions. And then obviously it's sell yourself. You are your own sales and marketing director. Nobody else is going to do it for you. You have to sell yourself to get the interview, and then to get the role. And then my 7 deadly sins were those horrible tattoos up there in the corner. So don't be late. I don't think I've ever been late for an interview. I've been very, very close to being late, and I've got a couple of quite funny stories about that. Once had an interview at 6 o'clock in the evening in Glasgow, which was quite odd. And I got held up driving across, and then the car park I was aiming for was shut, closed for repairs or something. So I had to park further away, and I had to walk like a maniac to get there. Then I couldn't blooming find the office. And the only place that was still open, I thought, right, I've got to go in there. I'm almost out of time. I've got to go in there and find out where the office is. So I went in, and then I realized, damn, it's a massage parlor. I brazened it out, and I went in there, ignored the smell of hot towels, just didn't look left, didn't look right, and I got my directions, and I got there on time. Another one, I had an interview somewhere near Luton, can't remember exactly where it was. Arrived at Edinburgh Airport in plenty of time. My EasyJet was cancelled, absolute nightmare. I managed to get on British Airways standby, flying to the wrong airport, flying to Heathrow. So I then had to change my car hire arrangements, drove like an absolute lunatic, didn't get a speeding ticket. I did get there in time. I didn't get the job. So don't be late. And don't be underprepared. I think I've spoken about that enough on the previous set, but it really is so obvious as a hiring manager if somebody hasn't done their homework, and it's not very impressive. Typos, that's part of your professionalism, eradicating typos. So if you struggle with that sort of thing, and some people do for various reasons, dyslexia or whatever, and that's perfectly understandable. Get somebody to check, somebody in your network. Can you check my CV? Can you check my covering letter? Go in with the crispest, best prepared set of collateral that you can. So if you've exited from a previous organization, or if you've had a bit of a gap, you'll quite often be asked, why did you leave the previous organization, or what have you been doing in the X number of months? Hard, because sometimes it's been tough. It's been tough in your gap. It's been tough. Maybe it was a tough story about why you did actually leave that last role. But those are ones that you absolutely need to practice. You need to rehearse. You need to be absolutely confident, clear, and positive about what you've been doing in the gap. And that's easy because you've been doing all this wonderful stuff in STA. you've been expanding your skills, etc., etc. I think if you are unclear, or if it seems a bit muddy there, then the hiring manager is just going to have some doubt, and you don't want to leave them with any doubt. You want to leave them with a nice, clean, positive impression. Some people just don't sell the fit. They just don't say, I am the ideal candidate because of X, Y, and Z. Now, you should do. Shouldn't be the first thing that you say when you walk in through the door or at the start of the Zoom session, but it absolutely can be part of your wrapping up at the end. You're asked for, if you've got any questions, we've got 10 minutes left. Use that time to just summarize why you think, even more so now that you've had this really good discussion in the interview, you've met the people that you'd be working for, that has reinforced your interest in the role. And I now think I'm an even better fit because of X, Y, Z reasons. Again, something you might need to practice, something that might not come naturally to you, but you shouldn't necessarily leave it to the hiring manager to figure that out. You should help the hiring manager, which is the next one as well. Next two, actually. You do need to build rapport and build a relationship with the people that are interviewing you. That comes with practice. Networking is a good way of practicing that. And then I think the last one, you need to be stand out as a candidate. You need to have something memorable about you, some uniques. Stand out for the right reasons, obviously, but don't be bland, don't be unmemorable. You're a standout candidate for these reasons, and talk about them. Yeah. Okay, so I've kind of got to the end of the road there. Sorry if that wasn't very interactive. Happy to sweep up anything that's in chat now, or just throw it wide open to any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Andrew? That was brilliant, Andrew. Thank you. Really enjoyed the massage parlour story. Not quite the same as an interview.
I hope nobody left in disgust at that point.
No, you've definitely kept everybody.
Was there anything came through on chat?
I've got one from Becky. Did he go back after the interview? Don't have to answer that.
No. That was actually a very, very weird interview, just to complete the story. So I got to this company in time, thank goodness. And he was one of these really, really garrulous Glaswegians who just talk. I could barely get a word in edgeways. It was really difficult. It seemed to be going quite well. He seemed to be enjoying talking. And I asked some questions at the end, and I wasn't massively sold on the role, but I thought, I really want to see if I can take this to the next stage. And then in his summing up, he sort of said, he almost made me a verbal offer. He said, so what would it take to, get you in here? So we had that conversation. I thought, this is good. I'll definitely get another interview, if nothing else. And I never heard another word from him. He's the most odd individual. I followed up with him so many times, and in the end, I just gave up. So yeah, you sometimes get some weird stuff. Yeah.
I think your point, Andrew, about the following up, I think that's the key element. And I think I can speak from my own experience. When I went for a job in Livingston, and I had the interview, and it went quiet, went really well. And it was just sort of went quiet. And I thought I wrote my letter in those days, and wrote another one, and then chased it up again. And then finally he came back and said, we've had a few internal problems, but here's your offer. When can you start? And you think it'd been like 6 months. It was bizarre, but it was a great job. So, So if you don't, I guess you have to trust your gut as well, whether it's the right one for you to follow up and put your energy into.
Yeah. No, I think that's great, and it reminds me of a couple of other things. Actually, I always come out with stories. So my first role in IT, which was with a company called ICL, who became Fujitsu Services. So the first role I went for, I didn't even get an interview, but I was really interested in the organisation, and I seem to click a bit with the recruitment consultant from the agency that they were using. Got a lot of echo all of a sudden. So I very proactively kept in touch with her, and that meant when the next tranche of roles came out, which admittedly were more suitable for me, I was in front of her mind, and I was on the front foot, and I got through the three-stage process quite slickly and landed it. And I've done that other times as well. You maybe don't strike lucky first time, but keep going, either with that recruitment consultant or that company, and you will be front of mind. You will be on their books, and that's right back into networking. You then think, right, those recruitment consultants are now in my first level network, and those are people who I will proactively keep in touch with.
I think one of the tricks I've learned as well, when you are having an interview, if they offer you a drink, take it, because then either they have to go and get it, which leaves you time to prepare and get yourself, or they have to give somebody else the call to go and get it, which then breaks the ice. So I think if you get offered a drink, even whether you don't want it, is take it.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. It just gives you time to actually settle, especially if you're in the room and they ask you. It just gives you that minute or two just to take a couple of deep breaths, settle yourself in, just get used to the. As Andrew is talking about, the environment. Oh, I'll come off camera. Just the environment, get to know the room. If you, for example, 9 times out of 10, usually you would have I would have had a suit on. If I knew the temperature was warm, take the jacket off. Just get to know the surroundings, and even if there's a second individual in the interview, actually strike a conversation with them, even if it's not about the interview, just asking how their day is, what they're working on. That kind of shows the interest in what that individual's been working on and what they're looking to do, and some